Before I begin, I'll say this story happened to a friend's family, Carlos, who lived in Mayer in 1988. He told me about it years later over drinks at a bar, when the conversation turned to weird, unexplainable stuff. Carlos was the kind of guy who didn't believe in ghosts, but as he talked, I could see the fear in his eyes, like he was still feeling it. He was 14 back then, and what happened in the apartment he shared with his parents and younger sister, Fernanda, changed their lives forever. It was August 1988, a damp winter in Rio. Mayer, if you don't know it, is a middle-class neighborhood full of old buildings and tree-lined streets, but with a worn-out feel, especially at night. Carlos's family lived in a 3-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building called Solar du Mayer, a 60s construction with thick walls, dimly lit hallways, and an elevator that groaned like it might collapse. The place already had a reputation among the neighbors. They said the old janitor, a guy named Jose, died there in the 70s, electrocuted while fixing wiring in the basement. No one liked to talk much about it, but the kids in the building swore. They heard strange noises coming from down there. It all started on a Thursday night. Carlos's parents, Dona Lucia and SCU Roberto, had gone out for dinner at some friend's place in Villa Isabel, leaving him and Fernanda alone. It was around 9 p.m., and they were in the living room watching TV, one of those late-night variety shows on Globo. Fernanda, who was 9, was lying on the couch, half asleep, while Carlos fiddled with a battery-powered radio, trying to tune into Radio Fluminense FM. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning in the front door's lock echoed through the apartment. They looked at each other, surprised. "They must have come back early," Carlos said, assuming it was their parents. The door opened with a slow creak, and Carlos heard heavy footsteps coming in. The sound was familiar. The way SCU Roberto dragged his dress shoes across the parquet floor, like he was always tired after work at the power company. He called out from the living room, "Dad, did you forget something?" No answer, just the sound of footsteps moving down the narrow hallway, past the kitchen, and straight into their parents' bedroom. Carlos thought it was odd, but didn't get up. Sometimes his dad was quiet when he was in a bad mood. He just glanced at Fernanda, who was now sitting up rubbing her eyes, and said, "Go to bed, Nanda, they're home." Then came the next sound. The bed in their parents' room creaked, like someone had flopped onto it hard. The old spring mattress always made that distinct noise whenever someone moved. Carlos frowned. Why would his dad go straight to bed without even saying hi? He decided to check if everything was okay. He got up from the couch, leaving the TV on, and walked down the dark hallway. The living room light barely reached there, and the hallway switch had been broken for weeks. When he got to the bedroom door, slightly ajar, he called softly, "Dad, you okay?" That's when he heard it. A deep, raspy voice came from inside the room, like it was muffled under the sheets. "I'm not your dad, kid." Carlos's heart stopped. That wasn't SCU Roberto's voice. It was hoarse, almost choked, like something was trying to speak while holding its breath. He pushed the door open slowly, hand shaking, and looked at the bed. It was dark, but he could see the outline of a body lying there, covered by the sheet up to the head. But the shape, it didn't look right. It was too big, too long, like whatever was there didn't fit the bed properly. He stepped back, feeling the cold parquet under his bare feet, and shouted, "Who are you?" The sheet moved slowly, like whatever was underneath was turning toward him. Before he could see more, Fernanda screamed from the living room, "Carlos, the TV!" He ran back, hard in his throat, and found his sister pointing at the television. The set, which had been working 5 minutes ago, now showed only static. But in the hiss, he could hear a low whisper, like multiple voices talking at once, things he couldn't make out. Fernanda started crying, and Carlos, not knowing what to do, grabbed the phone to call their parents. But the line was dead. He tried the neighbor in 302, SCU Oswaldo, who always helped in emergencies. Nothing. Then he heard it again. Footsteps in the hallway, coming from their parents' room. This time they were faster, heavier, like something big was running toward them. Carlos grabbed Fernanda's arm, flung open the apartment door, and raced down the fire escape with her, tripping over the concrete steps. They banged on the porter's lodge, waking up the porter, a skinny guy named Edson, who didn't know what was going on as Carlos yelled that someone was in the apartment. Edson went up with them, armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat he kept in the lodge. When they got there, the apartment door was wide open, but it was silent. The TV was still on, still showing static. But the whispers were gone. Their parents' bedroom was empty, the bed a mess, the sheet tossed on the floor, but no one there. Edson searched every room, even the laundry closet, but found nothing. He tried to calm Carlos down, saying it might have been a thief who ran off, but Carlos knew better. Thieves don't speak in a voice from the grave. Thieves don't vanish without a trace. Their parents got home an hour later, worried to find the porter with their kids downstairs. Carlos told them everything, but SCU Roberto thought it was just his imagination, maybe a nightmare he'd mixed up with reality. Dona Lucia believed him, though. She was devout to St. George and always said she felt things in the building. A few days later, she caught a healer from Copacabana. The woman, a short lady, came in, said some prayers with Rue, and stopped midway, pale. She said there was someone who hadn't left, something that liked pretending to be others. She wouldn't explain more, just told them to light a candle to St. Anthony every night and never leave the door open after sunset. After that, Carlos started noticing things. Sometimes he'd hear the bed in his parents' room creak in the middle of the night, even when they were in the living room. Other times, he'd see shadows dart past the corner of his eye in the hallway, but when he looked, nothing was there. Fernanda stopped sleeping alone, saying she heard someone whispering her name from the other side of the wall. The worst was one night when Carlos woke up and saw, through the crack in his bedroom door, the silhouette of a man standing in the living room, staring at the off TV. He called his dad, But when SCU Roberto got there, the figure was gone. The family moved the next year, in 1989, to a townhouse in Jacarepaguá. Carlos says he's never felt anything like that again, but to this day, he can't sleep with his bedroom door open. He looked into it later and found out Ayuze, the janitor who died in the basement, was known for being a prankster in life. He loved mimicking the residents to scare newcomers. Was it him? Or something using his memory to worm its way into their lives? Carlos doesn't know. He just knows that every time he passes Mayor and sees Solar do Mayor from afar, he still feels that chill down his spine, like something in there is waiting for him to come back. Before I start, I'll say that the story I'm about to tell happened to my younger brother, Nestor, around 2003. Give or take. He was about 17 at the time, and I was already in college, living in another city. Nestor was never one to make up stories or exaggerate. So when my mom told me about this years later, over coffee on a rainy afternoon, I knew it was true. He never wanted to talk to me about it himself, though. I think he's still afraid to relive it. It happened on a Saturday morning in early March. My parent house, an old two-story place in the Sao Paulo countryside, always had a heavy vibe. Big creaky windows, a long upstairs hallway that seemed to swallow daylight. Nestor was sleeping in late, taking advantage of no school. Our parents had left early for the market, and our other brother, Alexander, was at work. He helped out in a mechanic shop and usually didn't get home until late afternoon. Nestor woke up to the unmistakable sound of the front door slamming shut, a loud bang that echoed through the quiet house. He figured it was Alexander coming home early from work. It wasn't unusual for Alex to show up unannounced if the boss let them off early. So Nestor just grumbled to himself, rolled over, and tried to go back to sleep. Then he heard footsteps. First, the creak of the wooden stairs, step by step, as if someone was climbing slowly but heavily. Then the sound of boots dragging down the hallway, heading straight for a room he shared with Alex. Nestor frowned, still half asleep. Alex never moved that slowly. He was a loud guy, always bursting and talking or turning on the old radio in the corner. Still, Nestor didn't move. Who else could it be? The footsteps stopped at the door. He heard the latch turn, and the door opened with a faint squeak. He was facing the wall, lying on his side, and didn't turn around. Then he felt the bottom bunk shake slightly, like someone had flopped onto Alex's mattress. The old iron bunk bed always made a little noise when someone moved. Nestor waited a few seconds, but there was no sound, no hi, no sigh, nothing. It started to bug him. "Alex, why are you home so early?" "Something happened at work?" he asked, still not turning around, trying to sound casual. That's when he heard it. A deep, gravelly voice, almost like it came from a bottomless pit, answered from the bottom bunk. "Wrong guy, buddy." Nestor froze. His heart started pounding so hard he felt it in his chest. That wasn't Alex's voice. It didn't even sound fully human. It was slow, drawn out, like something was mimicking a person but didn't quite know how to talk. Panic hit him like a wave. He threw himself out of the bunk, nearly falling to the floor, and looked down, expecting to see an intruder, a burglar, anything to explain it. But there was no one there. The bottom bunk was empty, the mattress untouched, like no one had ever been there. The room was silent again, except for his ragged breathing. Nestor stood there, staring at the bed, trying to process what he'd just heard. Then he felt it, a cold shiver up his neck, like unseen eyes were watching him from some dark corner of the room. Without a second thought, he grabbed his car keys, his Nokia phone from the nightstand, and bolted. He stumbled down the stairs, flung open the front door, and jumped into his old Fiat Maria. He didn't even lock the house, just started the engine, and sped off to the little store where my mom worked as a cashier. When he got there, he was pale as a ghost. Mom said he could barely talk, stammering as he told her what happened. She dropped everything and took him to a corner of the store, trying to calm him down. He said he wasn't going back home alone, that he felt like it was still there waiting for him. Mom, who's always been a bit superstitious, got worried but tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe he'd imagined it. But deep down, she knew Nestor wasn't the type to make this up. Er det noen link, eller var noe verre? Nestor snakker fortsatt ikke om det. Han flyttet til en annen by i 2008 og unngår å komme tilbake. Moren bor der fortsatt sammen med Joao, men hun sier at hun noen ganger hører skritt i gangen om natten, selv når ingen er hjemme. Jeg vet ikke hva jeg skal tenke, bortsett fra at hver gang jeg tenker på den gamle Kay-sengen, får jeg frysninger som jeg ikke kan forklare. Vi ses snart, hvis du har motet.